Okay. So people have some familiarity with it can be confusing. Marv, I know, but I do not use it. Yeah, this is not necessarily content that you're going to need to know. Like, this isn't like this is just having a better understanding of how to use ACDSee kind of workshop. This isn't so much going to be showcasing tools or skills in regards to this. Is just sort of having a general understanding of how the software works and how to best utilize it. Okay, cool. So we have lots of people that are new to this concept. That's good. Very good, actually. Yeah, sorry for the delay, everybody. I was kicked out of my Zoom and had to sort of kicked out of my Zoom account and had to figure out a way to get back into it. So there was a slight delay there. It just happened at a time where it was the least convenient timing for that. So thanks for your patience while I sorted that out. I really appreciate that. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the database. So the database is, I've made this little graphic to sort of help understand the database better. But what the database is it's a holding place for all of this metadata that ACDSee creates. And yeah, wasn't just you. No, is everybody in this case, including me, Dean. Um, so the ACDSee database is basically it's this holding device for all of this different metadata that you create in ACDSee. And sort of utilizing this graphic that I created earlier today. So when I say metadata, there's lots of different metadata in ACDSee. There's proprietary metadata, which is ACDSee metadata, and then there's sort of general metadata like IPTC and EXIF. And sort of what I mean by that is if I was to navigate to any particular folder with any particular files on it here, let's see, should have some, some images that contain some metadata here. So when I'm looking at a metadata that's non-proprietary, so metadata that is created when you take the photo, um, metadata is filled in. So it's details like the shutter speed and the f-stop and the ISO. This information is stored in the EXIF portion, and this is sort of attached to the file themselves, right? Each file contains, its own sort of a camera metadata. Occasionally, you'll see IPTC metadata filled in. And what this looks like is it looks like content in relation to the author of the photo and sort of any copyright holdings. And sometimes you'll see this filled in, especially on purchasable stock photography, right? Like when you see this content filled in, that would be the case. Or people often, before they share these photos in a public setting on like a sort of a website, they'll go in and they'll fill in the metadata and their own images, right? Before they go ahead and share them, just so that they have some degree of it shows who the photo was originally taken by. This is just general metadata. And what I mean by that is this metadata is saved in the file information. So a good way to verify this, if I was to go to this actual file, I might choose a more distinct file to look at here, but let's navigate to, actually, you know what? Those are good. And the reason why, because they have EXIF information. But if I was to navigate to this file, right? If I was to find it on my PC here, so here's my pictures folder. If I was to go to this same folder, so 2023, and this auto crop one, and I'm looking at this guy right here. So I'll just match that. It's this one right here. If I go to the properties on this image, so I can right click on it and click on properties. If I go to details, information about the camera, right? The EXIF data that I'm showing here correlates to the information that I'm seeing in the properties. So what I mean to illustrate here between these two is that they are the same. So what ACDSee does is it takes this general information that's either produced by the camera when the photo is taken, or it has been added to the file in order to communicate copyright and authorship, right? This is general. So general would be visible to anyone. Meaning that if I was to open up this is what I'm seeing. If you were to open up this is what you'd see. And if you were to send this to a client, they could see this property information, right? They could simply just right click on any file on their computer and determine the properties of the file. So where things get a bit more unique is when it comes to ACDSee metadata. So ACDSee metadata is a series of information of settings, controls, customization that's created in ACDSee itself. And so this I will refer to our handy dandy image here because I think it helps to illustrate what ACDSee metadata is and how it's stored. So really broadly, we'll cover all of this, but ACDSee metadata is the following information. So it's things like thumbnails, keywords, categories, color labels, ratings, and face data. And those of you that have some degree of familiarity or have used ACDSee a bit, you will know that this is information that you can add to images. Thumbnails aren't really added, but they're browsed. So when you go to a new folder, you'll see the thumbnails pop up as you navigate to a folder. And so what it'll do is it'll just create a little referenceable thumbnail image. That's something that's stored in the database. Keywords, meaning the actual keywords that we add ourselves in manage mode, and categories. Those are stored in the database. That's ACDSee metadata. Otherwise, color labels, ratings, and face data. Face data is sort of taken care of in people mode, but those are all different forms of metadata that's added in ACDSee. So thumbnails, keywords, categories, color labels, ratings, and actually notes, authors, dates, and captions. These are all things that you can edit in manage mode, where face data is something that's broadly controlled in people mode. And this is what ACDSee metadata is. So these are proprietary in that when we add this to the file, this is something that we can now browse to, right? So when we add thumbnails or keywords or categories, we typically do that in manage mode. We do that on the right-hand side here. So if I was to just look at this file and open up the Organize tab right down here, you can see that categories is listed, keywords is listed, and then we have some other metadata up top here. So these are our ratings that I talked about. So I can give my file a rating between 1 and 5, and that rating is displayed. The same goes for color labels. So if I want to attach a color label to my image, the color label pops up. Similarly, if I wanted to, let's just go, this looks like a landscape. If I wanted to add a keyword to my image, for example, nature and ocean, those keywords are then selected. So they're indicated right here in our keyword panel here. And so what happens is we've added all this information to our file. So we've added this content, this ACDSee metadata. We've added a rating, we've added a label, and we've added a keyword. Now, keep in mind, the other ones that we listed were categories, so we could go and add a category. We could add some face data. This is all information that we can add to this file. Now, what ACDSee does with this information is it uses to browse, because the ACDSee is an extremely powerful management software. And it's a management software that is predicated on this proprietary metadata, this ACDSee metadata. When you make changes to a file based on, oh, I really like this image, I'm going to rate it 5, or I'm going to set this as a label of red because that indicates X value to me, or I'm going to add these keywords to my image because I want to search for these images later, we can use the catalog panel that's on the left here to actually facilitate that search, right? So the whole point of the catalog panel is to search for various values. For example, if I go to ratings and I look for a rating of 5, those are all my images that are in my hard drive that are rated 5, right? And this is pretty powerful. So if I had some sort of value associated with 5, that means that let's say I really like these images. They're my exquisite images. They're my 5-star images. Well, then I can sort of bring these images up. I can browse to these images, based on values that I've already added to the software or to these images. However, they're not moved from their original locations because browsing isn't really engaging with the folder structure. So when we look for an image using the folders themselves by navigating to pictures and then a specific folder, the contents of that folder is displayed to us. And that is functionally browsing for a file. But using the catalog pane is more nuanced than that. Now what we're doing is we're taking a value that we've created using an ACDSee, and then we're sort of searching for that value because we've assigned that value to our images. So this matters for a bunch of reasons. If we have huge collections of photos, right? We don't want to be navigating to folder to folder to folder inside 6 or 7 different subfolders to try to find the images we're looking for. I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that photo of an eagle that I took in 2021, while on vacation. I know exactly the folder it's in, but I don't want to navigate straight to it. So what I do is I just go look for the keyword of eagle. And then based on that keyword, it's brought up for me. I can simply do that. I can go, oh, I got keywords here. Let's say I know it's going to be an animal. It's going to be a bird. Oh, there's an eagle keyword right here. There it is. Those are all the images that I've established are eagles, right? Based on the keyword of eagle. And then they're under the the hierarchy of bird, and then they're above that are animals. So when we're creating this this mechanism of categorizing our files, or cataloging our files rather, when we're adding keywords, when we're adding categories, when we're adding ratings, when we're adding face labels, we are creating a system that ACDSee saves, right? We're taking this information and we're putting it into the database. And earlier I said that this information was proprietary. And so what I mean by that is this is information that pertains to you, not necessarily others. Because you have the files, but then you also have the information of the database. So this isn't information that's necessarily shared to other people. This is information that ACDSee uses on your specific PC to find your specific images. So let's come back to our image here of the graphic that I've just made to sort of help illustrate, how databases work. So in our image here, we have our old version of ACDSee. So we no longer use this, meaning this was, let's say you're somebody who upgrades to a new version of ACDSee every 2 or 3 years, which is very typical, right? People tend to skip one version of the most recent product and just upgrade every 2 years, right? And there's lots of reasons for this, right? They don't want to spend, every year, or the other thing too is that they don't want to necessarily reconstruct their database every couple years. In this video, this workshop today, we're going to be talking about how to reconstruct your database in a quick and easy way. But this sort of gives you the idea. So this is what people do. They have their version of ACDSee, and they're getting ready to upgrade. So they're moving to whatever the new version of ACDSee is. And so in these boxes here, I have the database that I'm working with. So ACDSee through default basically is going to create a database for you. ACDSee actually has to have a database to function. Right? So by default, you're going to have a database that's created for you. But when it comes to ACDSee, you can actually reference databases or use databases from previous softwares, previous versions of ACDSee. So typically, I think you can convert your database. I think going back three years in the software. Don't quote me on that, but definitely 2 years is the case for sure. I think it goes as far as back as 3. Meaning, if I was using ACDSee 2021, I should be able to convert that to 2024 using my database from from my prior software that I was using, the prior version of ACDSee. So I need not create an entirely new database. What I can do is I can actually pull from my database that I created, let's say this 2023 database. I can use this. And so its corresponding keywords, categories, labels, ratings, and all this other metadata that's here, right? That's sort of contained within the database is then just used in my new version. If I wasn't to do this, if I didn't want to convert my database, well, that's fine. Then ACDSee is going to create a database that contains all this metadata as I create it, right? Keywords, categories, ratings and labels, face data, etc. So the value of this is basically it's going to create a database for me regardless that's going to contain this information. Or what I can do is I can go through the process of converting my old database so that I have those keywords, categories, labels, ratings that I've created previously. Notably, keywords and categories are pretty labor intensive, right? Creating those is actually not a fast process. It's kind of it's a nuanced process, and there's lots of division of hierarchy between different keywords and categories. So these are really going to be the ones you're going to want to keep. Ratings, labels, those can be assigned and fixed, but as it comes to keywords and categories, these are typically the things that people really want to keep that they've already established. Just out of curiosity, kind of yes or no, or so far, I guess a question is this making sense for people? Is there anything that anyone wants any clarity in regards to? I just want to sort of have a chance to stop and ask a question to make sure that everybody's following along. Thanks, Dean. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Tersh. Thank you, Not. Thank you, Bill. Okay, sweet. This is really good. It makes sense so far. If people have questions as we go through, just fire them in the Q&A panel. I'll answer them, as soon as I can if they pertain to what we're talking about here. So, having a database that you're adding keywords, categories, ratings, labels to is optimal. And the reason why it's optimal is because it enables you to catalog your files really quickly and efficiently. I can navigate to these files because they have keywords, ratings, labels associated with them. And you know what? If you use ACDSee just as an editor, you go in develop mode or edit mode and you fix your images, and that's the extent of your interaction, that's fine. That's totally cool. But ACDSee is historically a manager. It's a management software, right? So we've created these sort of systems in place to make sure that people can accurately, go through the process of adding metadata to their files and then searching with that metadata. Because the reality with photographers is that they take thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of photos, maybe just in a year, So this whole process of going through and after a photo shoot, rating your images, adding keywords and labels to your images is part of like a good photography workflow, especially for those of people that do this on a professional level, right? Or an intermediate level. So zooming back out again, we'll just summarize what we're seeing here. Also, just out of curiosity, does this image make sense? Is this worth sharing on the community portal just so people have is this something you want to be a reference to? I just made it really quickly just because I thought it visualized, what we're talking about today pretty well. But to summarize, we are always going to be interacting with a newer version of ACDSee at some point because we want some tools or functions that ACDSee offers, right? And so what we've done is we've created a system that whenever we have a new version of ACDSee, we're either creating a database, right, from scratch, or we're referencing a previous version, a previous database that we've already started working on. And then, so within that version of ACDSee, we have that corresponding database, and within that database, we have its corresponding keywords, categories, ratings, labels, etc. All of this information that's listed here. Okay, so why don't we just Bill said you might add the other database EXIF in your diagram. Yeah, EXIF isn't actually in it's not in the It's not actually in the database, it's in the file itself. Okay, so Marv says, I'm not understanding the difference in database between 23 and 24. Yeah. So within your ACDC that you used to use, Marv, there was a database that it created, right? Um, so because ACDC has to have a database to operate. And when you were using ACDC 2023, Marv, you created a bunch of keywords, categories, ratings, labels, etc. All this metadata that you're interacting with. So it in this older version of using ACDC from let's say 2022 or something like that, right? You have this database. Now you're using a new version of the software, and once again it creates a brand new database for you, a database 2024 in the newest version of the product. So you're starting from scratch, right? You're going to create new keywords, new categories, new ratings and labels. However, because you've done all this work previously, you want to be able to reference or to essentially convert this old database to your new software. And so what I'm trying to illustrate is just to start is that we can actually, and maybe what would help here is I could put a giant arrow here that's pointing to the new product because we can actually move this to database 2024. So we'll get to converting that in a moment here. Let's answer Dean's question. When you say reference, does the new version import the old version into the new database, or does it use the old database file as well as the new database? So ACDC is going to assume that you've never used the software before, right? So it doesn't automatically convert your old database to the new version of ACDC. And so we've created a system for you to quickly convert that. Um, so it has created a brand new version for you when you go to install it. Like say the newest version of the product. So I think what is now really useful based on these two questions that Marv and Dean had, what does it look like to convert an old database? Okay. So here's my folder. I just installed the new product, right? It's 2025 and it's a new ACDC and I want to utilize my existing database that I have. So what I mean by that is look at all these keywords that I've created that I want to be able to use, right? To do this, what I need to do is I need to go to Tools, Database, and Convert Database. And so what the conversion database a tool does is it takes a previous database, so the 2023 one in that example, and it moves it over and it basically makes this database live and so operational for the most recent version of the software, for the one I'm using. So when I click on Tools, Database, Convert Database, it's just going to walk me through the conversion process. For example, I'm just going to click Next in the wizard here. And you'll notice that even though I'm using ACDC 2024, which is indicated by the topmost portion here, it's going to automatically select the previous version. So here's Ultimate 2023, and you can see that all of these different versions are listed. Looks like it goes back to Pro 8 or 2018. So it goes back several years. But I know for a fact that I had ACDC Ultimate 2023 on my computer, and it's already pre-selected that location for me. It knows where where that database that I created in Ultimate 2023 is. And it knows that it was the default database. It was the database that was created upon me creating or using that software to begin with. So it's actually already done everything for me. It knows that I was using a default database, and it knows that I was using ACDC 2023. And then from here, I would go through the process of clicking next, and it would go through the process of converting that old database and making it the one that I'm using now. Does that make sense to people so far? So this would be a process of me taking my database from 2023 and bringing it over and sort of modernizing it with a new product. Okay. Well, let's see. Question is, do you choose to rebuild thumbnails? You could. It just means that you wouldn't have to necessarily browse to every single folder um, to be able to have a visual representation of it. Because thumbnails are typically something that pops up when you browse into a folder or you catalog or you're looking at a specific catalog. So I would definitely just click it. Yeah, it's just gonna add it to it. I'm not sure I understand the question, Terge, in regards to database manufacturer. Steve asked, where do I see an old database file in the new database file on my PC? Yeah, so it actually lists them here. I'll try to navigate to it. It just takes a bit because it's quite buried, but here I'll show you where they are. So here it indicates to me that it's under let's see here. It's under users. So I'll navigate to my local disk. I'll go to my users folder and there we go. So I'm in users here. And then it sort of indicates to me that it's under admin. Okay, so admin and then app data. And then it's under local and then ACD systems. And then it's under catalogs. And then I have all the previous versions that I have here. So it looks like the current version, 170 is version 2024, an alt there. And then 160 it recognizes as Ultimate 2023. So it already will tell you the location, provided that you have a previous one installed here. And so this would be, for example, if I was to go into alt default is my current database here. This is a database for 2024. But we don't typically show that because A, it's really buried and it's not necessarily the most conducive to fast understanding. So what we try to do is to choose a version of ACDSee that you're previously using and then using this tool to sort of specify, if that makes sense. Okay, let's go back to my questions here. Move these. Hopefully that answers your question, Steve. Okay, Sharon asked a question. Can you talk about where the old and new database should be stored on your computer? So we just talked about that, especially use external hard drives. If you use external hard drives, they should still, unless you've specified when you created the database. Okay, pause. This is a good point. So by default, it's going to be located in your, I believe your C drive on your PC. Okay. But what Sharon's brought up is a cool point. So when you open up ACDSee, you can create a database that isn't the default one. And so if I was to create a database, say new, I actually can choose the location for where this database goes. So Sharon's says, "Oh, I actually use ACDSee a lot, but I largely work off of like a terabyte hard drive, say." So what Sharon would do is she would browse when she creates a version of ACDSee for the first time, and she'd create a database on her hard drive, and so it would change the location of that, and it would be hard drive database. Or external hard drive database, right? So that would be saved then on her terabyte hard drive, external hard drive, and then a new, essentially, a database would be created on that external hard drive. When you create a new database, ACDSee will then be using that database. So for Sharon's workflow, what's important for her is she needs to do one of two things. She needs to, if she's new to ACDSee and she's starting her database for the first time, great. She just needs to save her database to that external hard drive. If she's using an old version of ACDSee, like she wants to use her database from 2023 or 2020, what she needs to do is she needs to go through the process of actually locating her database, her entry, and just maybe making a copy of it or moving it onto her external hard drive and then referencing that in the software. But there's the ability to add a new hard drive on a in a new location. So it's not always necessarily going to be in the C drive location that I've mentioned here. Sharon says, would it be best to use C drive for a central database and reference each hard drive separately? I would say personally, because ACD is sort of set up in such a way to use the C drive, and databases are super tiny, they're not actually large files. I would just use the C drive. But you asked a really relevant question, Sharon, and you wanted to know whether or not I could move my database around or have it on an external hard drive. And yeah, you certainly can. But maybe for like simplicity's sake and ease of use, I would just like leave the database where it is in its default location. That's so you just have access to it, you know? Um, whereas having your files on an external hard drive, right, is going to be more useful than actually and creating a metadata that you can reference that external hard drive might be more useful than actually putting the database file itself on the new hard drive. But yeah, good question. Really good question. David Gutterman asked, can't ACDC metadata be embedded into the file as IPTC? Sort of. This would allow someone to read metadata even for those without ACDC. Okay, David's got a great question. So let's just summarize what I've talked about so far. And then we're going to talk about embedding metadata because we haven't talked about embedding metadata yet, but it's a part of a really good workflow when it comes to the database. Okay. So, what have we talked about so far? So, when it comes to ACDC, you have all this different, oops, that's not where we want to open that. You have all this different metadata that's created in ACDC. Broadly speaking, there's two types of metadata. There's the metadata that pertains to the database, which is ACDC metadata. It is proprietary metadata that's created in the software. Thumbnails, keywords, categories, color labels, ratings, face data, notes, authors, dates, and captions. There is what I'm calling general metadata. General metadata is not created in the software. It's created on capture with your camera, and it's added manually by users. This is IPTC and EXIF. So we have two types of metadata. We have the ACDC metadata that's created in the software, and we have our general on capture customized metadata. Everybody, no matter who they are, no matter if they're a client, your dad, a cousin, doesn't matter, they will be able to see EXIF metadata and IPTC metadata provided that it is in the file, if it is saved to the file. Your client, your dad, your cousin, whomever, will not be able to see the ACDC metadata unless they have access to ACDC. And importantly, the metadata has been embedded. David's asking a good question. So he's asking, can't the metadata be stored? Can't the ACDC metadata be stored somewhere in the IPTC section here, right? So that anyone can see it. How do I take that ACDC metadata that I have and move it here, right? So super valid question. And the one that we typically say to people that's possible to do is keywords and categories. These are things that we can move into the IPTC column from ACDC metadata. I'm going to try to find an image here. I have a bunch of birds here that we recently did this in a different workshop, so I'll find a way to showcase this. So David can see that I have a bunch of different toucans here. So there's all these different toucans. So when I have them highlighted here, they're all animals, okay? They're all birds. They're all toucans. And then some of them are a specific type of toucan called an aracari. So they have existing metadata, ACDC metadata. These are ACDC keywords. What I can do is I can take these keywords, okay, and I can move them into the IPTC keyword column by doing this. I'll show you. Let's take this food, for example, here. Okay, so I have some food here. Let's do the first row. Let's add a keyword. I have a food keyword here. So let's just add a general food keyword to all of my images here. So that should be, let's see here, make sure that that's added to every single image here. Yeah, okay. So food is a keyword that now is contained in these highlighted images. How do I then move that keyword that I've created in ACDSee to the general EX IPTC tab here? So what I would do is if I have created a keyword in ACDSee, I would right click on those images. I would navigate to metadata. And what I would do is I would take the embedded keyword and I would move it to the IPTC column. The only thing I need to do here is I need to actually embed the ACDSee metadata, which I'll explain in a moment. But I have done that. And then so I could move that, embed keywords to IPTC. So I would do that, and then it would list them here under the various keyword section. It would list the keywords that I've added here. Looks like there's an image that had multiple keywords earlier, but most of them just have the food keyword added. So to answer David's question, provided that the images have an ACDSee keyword added to them, like food, for example, in our images here, what I can do is I can take that keyword and I can move it into the IPTC column. IPTC is different from ACDSee metadata. This is general. Now, if I was to send David this image, okay, and he opens it up in his version of ACDSee, he opens it up on his computer. So I'm looking for that image of the spaghetti here. If I was to open this up in properties panel here, so here's David, he's opening up the image and he wants to see that, the keyword of food has been added to this image. He can go to the details tab on his own computer and you can see that it's listed under something called tags. So that is now added to the image, and it is universal and visible to anyone other than somebody using ACDSee. So that's sort of like an extra step, an extra level to something we're already talking about, but that's how we would add ACDSee keywords to the IPTC column. So something that is now visible to everyone. So David, did that answer your question? That does allow you to add some metadata to the IPTC column, and it makes it visible to others. There's been a lot of questions I've seen coming up in the chat. If you can, just please fire them into the Q&A. So let's come back around to what I was talking about earlier. Before David asked that question, we were talking about we got to the point of talking about embedding metadata. I'm just going to open up a folder here that has some good landscape images. Let's see here. Yeah, this will be fine. Thank you, David. That's a great question. So we've talked about what's in the database. We've talked about how to convert the database. We've talked about even creating new databases. Okay. The one thing we haven't really talked about is cataloging files. So I'm going to give you a scenario. You have all of your images. They're on an external hard drive. And you've had an issue with your computer hard drive, say. And the computer hard drive is compromised and you no longer have access to the database that was created in 2023. You've got a new computer since then. You've installed the most recent version of ACDSee, and you go to convert your data, or you go to convert your database, and you realize, oh yeah, no, I can't convert my database because my previous hard drive on my computer was compromised. So how would I go about that? Well, in this extremely specific example, um, what you would want to do, okay, is you would want to make sure you're embedding metadata within your files. So you can convert your database predicated on the existence of a previous database. But while you're editing an ACDSee, I'll just highlight these three images, for example. While I'm editing an ACDSee, say I'm like, oh, I really like these images. I'm going to give them a 5 stars. They're landscape images, and landscape images for me are always labeled green, right? And these are all nature images. So I'm going to give them the nature keyword. And let's say that they're taken in the winter. So I'm going to give them the winter keyword. So now these images, as I'm editing them, as I'm adding this ACDSee metadata, oh, look, I've rated them. Oh, look, I've labeled them. And oh, look, I've added keywords. You'll notice that this little camera icon appears on the film icon, rather, appears on the bottom left-hand corner of every one of these images. What this indicates to me, okay, is that this information has been added to these files, but it is not embedded within them. So it's contained within the database. The database has this access to this information, but I can actually write this information to these specific files so that ACDSee can use this information in the future. So when I embed this metadata, what I can do is, first of all, if I've embedded metadata and I go to leave the software or close the software, ACDSee is going to prompt me to save this metadata. Okay. So at the end of a session, ACDSee is going to go, hey, you've got all these keywords and labels and ratings you've added. You want to embed this, right? You want to embed this within the files. So it'll give you an opportunity to do that. But just to illustrate this right now, what I can also do is I can right click on these images. I can go to metadata and embed ACDSee metadata. So now if I've embedded this metadata, okay, so once embedded, the little film icon will disappear. And so it'll know that now this information is within the file. It's embedded within the file. So the cool thing about this is in the future, my database was compromised, but I have all this images that I've embedded, right? I've gone through this process of embedding all this information as I've been editing because I'm smart. What I can do is I can go to tools and I can go to database and I can catalog my database based on the files themselves. So I can go to catalog files. And what this is going to give me the ability to do is I'll just read it out. That's actually pretty self-explanatory. But basically it says ACDSee automatically adds thumbnails and file information to the database as you browse. You can use the catalog files tool to add groups of filters to the database without having to first browse the folders. In addition, certain ACDSee metadata, including keywords, categories, and tags, will only be added to the database by cataloging with this tool. So what I can do is I can take the ACDSee metadata, including categories, keywords, tagged, and collections, even face data, and I can reconstruct that into my database, provided that I have that information embedded within the files. So if I was to click Start, for example, and go through this process, the corresponding labels and keywords and ratings, etc., would be added to my blank database that I've just started. So what the takeaway from this is, always embed your metadata, because in the event that you need to reconstruct a database with some of this information, you can do that using the catalog files tool. So what you should have taken away from this is the following. I have here sort of a graph sort of indicating what ACDSee metadata is, how the database works. I might like figure out a way to create a little bit more in-depth graphic for this, and I'll share it on the community page. But basically, every version of ACDSee contains its own respective database. And so I have a choice. Do I want to start using a new database or do I want to like reference an old database? So when I reference an old database, what I'm doing is I'm going to, let's see here. Oh, I'd have to be in manage mode. But I would go through the process of converting my database, right? If I want to use an older one. If I want to use a new one, carry on. That's fine. Go through the process of adding your ratings, adding your categories, your labels, etc., keywords, and just make sure to embed that information. And then when 2025 comes along and I'm ready and I like, oh, I created this beautiful database that I've started in 2024, all good. I just go through the process of converting that database to the most recent version of the software I'm using. That way I'm keeping thumbnails, keywords, categories, color labels, ratings, face data, notes, authors, dates, and captions when I'm using the software. I'm keeping this information I've already created. So that kind of covers everything I wanted to talk about today. I know that there's probably a couple questions. I'll go through and work through them in chat here. But just so everybody understands, that's kind of the general, the idea of what the purpose of the database is. Steven asked, still a little unclear if it's writing to the file just as mentioned in ACDSee, making destructive or non-destructive changes to the raw file. That's a good question. How does it work in regards to that? I think what it would do, Steve, is that in the case for a file that can't be written to, it will create a sidecar file that is referenced by ACDSee that contains that metadata. So JPEGs, for example, are obvious, like you can just write directly to the JPEG. But for raw files, it would have to create a sidecar file. Sharon asked, "How long should I expect it to take to convert an old database?" It actually doesn't take very long, like 5 minutes or less. Like it's not a slow process. Richard asked, "Did you copy or move the keyword to IPTC?" Great question. So in the conversion process that I believe it was Dave that was the person who asked the question. What I would do is, okay, so I'm going to add some keywords to my image here. These two images say nature, ocean, and summer in this. So I have these two images. They have metadata added to them now, which would mean that I would like to embed that within the file. So it's then embedded. And that gives me the ability to then move that information to the IPTC keyword column. So what I would do is I would right click on these images, I'd go to metadata, and I would say embed keywords to IPTC. What this does is it takes the ACDSee keywords that I've created, that I've added and embedded to these files, and then it will move them to the IPTC keyword, I guess, field there. So when I click that, boom, nature, ocean, and summer are added to the keyword column, which then makes this visible to others, not just myself. This information is now present to other viewers, provided that they have these files. Richard, does that answer your question? Sharon asked, rebuilding database, if it takes really long and seems to be frozen, which I do, try to end task, close program, I would contact our support. You can end the task. That's not going to cause any problems. It's not like you don't have your existing database. But if you're having issues with it, I would definitely contact our support team. They may be able to help in regards to maybe there's a pathing issue there. Richard, thank you. How to delete a database, please? Oh, that's a good question. I suppose you can just delete it. So in this case, you can go to File, Database, and Open. I mean, I have a database here. I could probably just delete this database. I would obviously need a database in order to operate ACDSee. It's going to have one to reference one. But I wouldn't do this. Okay, Alan, I wouldn't delete your database unless you have created a new one. I just go through the process of creating a new database first. And then delete your, the database that you want to delete, the database in question. But just make sure you have a database you're working off of first, before you go about deleting any old ones. And note that, if you delete a database, it's gone. So all of the contents, the keywords, the labels, the ratings, etc., are totally gone too. Dean asked, the icon is a hard drive and used to represent database typically. Yes. Steve asked, does ACDC automatically create keywords for pictures in a new folder, or must the user create and store? Keywords. Yeah. So basically ACDC has two ways to interact with keywords. There is AI keywords, okay? And then there's sort of user created or manual keywords. AI keywords are sort of keywords that ACDC establishes based on sort of looking at the image, analyzing the image. For example, when I click on this image, Dean, um, you can see a forest here. So ACDC has created the following AI keywords for this image. It's created nature, nature event, fog, and tree. Okay. So when I go to the catalog panel to find images, right? One of the ways I can find images is going to AI keywords. So if I wanted to go to nature and go to natural event and fog, this image would come up along with any other images that it deems to have foggy, foggy natural event. So ACDC is looking at your files and creating these AI keywords. However, these keywords are like automatically associated with a file, right? Whereas AI keywords are a hierarchical keyword structure that we have total control over. So we're establishing what we determine to be the keywords in this image. Now, there's some like blend over of this. So, for example, if I really liked the AI keyword of nature, I could go in and click this plus button, and then it would be moved to the manual keyword section, which I have control over. But basically, short answer question is sort of. ACDC does automatically create AI keywords, but it does not create these manual keywords for you. These you must create. If you don't like the one of the AI keywords ACDC created, can you change it? Yeah, you can bin it or remove it from the file. That is a bit beyond the scope of this workshop today. I could do a workshop on AI keywords itself if you'd like to see that. But we recently did a workshop on keywords, and this was covered extensively. So you can check that on our YouTube page. Yes, for one picture. Yeah. But the other thing, I would direct you there to that YouTube video because it's going to answer all those keyword related questions. Okay, so I think there was a couple more questions before this. Oh, I see. Okay. Daryl asked, if one starts with a new 2024 file and goes with the option of cataloging 2023 files rather than using the conversion option, do the categories, for instance, get automatically added automatically to the 2024 category list? This will probably be a reread for me. If one starts with a new 2024 file, so file is ambiguous. Do you mean a photo or do you mean the database? And goes with the option of cataloging 2023 files. Rather than using the conversion option, do the categories, for example, okay. So if one starts with a new 2024 database and goes to the option of cataloging 2023 files, rather than using, okay, so yeah, you're just creating totally new ones. Do the categories, for instance, get added automatically? No. No, it'd be brand new. There would be no categories or keywords added in your new database. So you would have to, if you want the data, the categories and keywords that you had created previously, you would need to do one of two things. You would need to catalog those files individually for their respective keywords, or you would need to reference your old database. Yeah, good question. Richard, I asked, I'm having trouble with incremental backups rapidly filling up a 4 terabyte hard drive. The incrementals seem to be almost the size of the original full backup. What's up? Terabyte. Um, that's I'm sorry, Richard. That's kind of beyond the scope of my knowledge. I would pose a question on our community page to the developers if you're curious about is it a process that's happening because of ACDC? That would be my question there. But yeah, if you're curious about that, I would either reach out to them on the community portal or just directly reach out to support, because there might be something going on there, or maybe the software is operating normally and it's causing issues with maybe there's redundancy there. Steve asked, can the raw files be stored on an external drive, such as a Synology drive, and the database be stored locally so the editing process is not slowed down? Um, and the database be stored locally so the editing process is not slowed down. Raw files can be stored on an external hard drive, and you can be referencing a sort of internal database. Uh, the thing about that is that obviously when that external hard drive is disconnected, right? Um, that database will contain all the information that pertains to that external hard drive. But it might create a situation where you would have to like remap that. So you'd have to re-navigate and browse to all this to that external hard drive. I don't. It's not necessarily optimal, um, but I don't think it's going to produce issues where it's going to slow things down too much. Like the main thing that you're concerned about is loading thumbnails. You're saying like, hey, the thing that causes the most issue in regards to operating off of external hard drive is making sure that those thumbnails are previously referenced and browsed. Well, provided that the database exists and that the hard drive is plugged in and you've browsed those folders, then the thumbnail will be created in the database, and that shouldn't cause issues in terms of the browsing speed. Okay, is there any other questions related more to the content we've covered today? Sorry, I can't provide more, in-depth answers to some of these questions. It's just a bit beyond my understanding. That might be better questions to ask towards the developers in this case. Just a sort of a summary again of some of the things that we've talked about today. So what we did is we sort of took our understanding of ACDC and introduced the database as a major component of it. So we looked at like what is contained within the database itself. We talked about what it looks like to convert databases from older software or older versions of the software. We talked about embedding and cataloging our files, so embedding metadata and cataloging our files. And we looked broadly at what is, how we go about adding metadata in ACDC as well. So things like labels, keywords, ratings, etc. What else did we talk about today? Yeah, and I suppose what we just did is we communicated ways that to improve your workflow based on all of the work you've previously done in previous databases. We also briefly talked about what it looks like to create new databases and sort of where databases are stored. Yeah, that kind of covers everything today that I wanted to talk about. I hope this workshop helped like alleviate a little sort of confusion when it comes to the database and provided a sort of a better understanding of it. It's one of those things that I think is a bit misunderstood when it comes to ACDC, sort of how files interact. And hopefully what this has done is showcase that at least what the limitations of the database are, so you understand what it sort of controls and how it controls those things. So thank you everybody for participating today. If there's any other questions, I'll sort of answer them as they come up, but that covers everything that I wanted to talk about today. And I really appreciate you sticking around for this workshop. And most importantly, thank you so much for your patience while I figured out what was going on with my Zoom session there, because I was having some issues at the beginning. So I appreciate your patience there. Thank you, George. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Not. Thank you, Arena. Thank you, Armando. Thank you, Bill. Terj asks, can one database be shared between two users, or can two users with access to the same shared network drive access the same database? There's some real limitations when it comes to that. That is a developer question. I would reach out to the developer portal section of the community page. I know that there's some issues with multiple people writing to the same database at the same time. Yeah, I would touch base with them. That's a great question, though. Honestly, I would like to know the answer to that myself. Marv, great class. Worth waiting for at the beginning. Oh, thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah. Um, yeah, I was scrounging for login credentials this morning, so I'm sure everyone's had that experience, but I appreciate that, Marv. That's kind of you.